Hi everyone, welcome back to the Civrays InMoov. Really excited this time. We finally get to have a play around with that Raspberry Pi. I've been building up to this for quite some time now, so I'm quite excited about getting it actually running. So let's start by having a look at the Raspberry Pi itself. I've got here the 8 gig version of the Raspberry Pi 4, and I also picked up a official USB-C power supply. Thought that might be quite handy to have. Certainly helped me set it up. One thing I wasn't particularly impressed with was the packaging. It literally come like this. There was no anti-static bag in here, or it's just literally just flopping around in the box. It's not really a problem, it just didn't seem very impressive. So that's the Raspberry Pi itself. One of the main differences on the Raspberry Pi 4 is that they now have these micro HDMI ports, and there's 2 of them. I guess it's handy to have 2, but it is a bit of a pain being micro and not full size, although you can make your project smaller. And then we also get a USB-C power supply, which I guess is an upgrade. I'm not familiar with all of the specs, but we have 4 USB ports here and an Ethernet port. And then I think there is also the audio jack here. We have the SD card, and I think we've got a display port and a camera port. I think that's the display and that's the camera. Power supply itself is obviously USB-C. Just know that if you pick up the official one, you're pretty confident it's going to work. So as I said in the previous video, my plan was to use this little HDMI adapter here, and I thought that we would be able to plug this in to the side here, and then the Raspberry Pi 4 would sit on the top like this and plug into the HDMI port. But as I've discovered, it's clearly designed to go the other way up, so it's almost as if the HDMI port is upside down, and it actually goes in like that, which I actually think is a little ugly. I didn't think that was as neat as I was expecting it to be. There's a few disadvantages to this which I don't like. Firstly, the USB ports are going to be at the top, which I think I prefer them at the bottom, and also we can't get to the GPIO header pins, which are almost certainly going to want to access at some point whilst I'm building the InMoov. So I'm not very impressed with that. Also, it arranged like this, it won't snap into the back of the robot, because we slot it in at the bottom and then we kind of snap it forwards like that. But with these ports sticking out the top like that's just not going to fit. So that's a non-starter. That's not going to work at all. So I've changed the plan. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mount it around here somewhere, sort of more in the middle, maybe not exactly in the middle. And then instead of using this HDMI adapter, I'm going to use the original one that came with it, which is this one. I'm going to plug that in there like that. And then what I'm going to order is a small extension lead, a HDMI extension lead, which essentially converts the micro sized ports to this standard size port. So I'll have a small cable that just runs across here. I actually think it's going to be about 20 centimeters long, so it will have to kind of loop down a little bit and then come back up. I was hoping it was going to be really short and just literally run straight across here, but reading the specs again after I'd ordered it, I've realised it's a little longer than I was expecting, but that should work. I've printed out this little bracket. I've put 4 mountings on there that line up with the holes in the Pi, so they can be attached on there like that. And then my plan is to mount that across here Now I think I'll eventually redesign this main surround to have some taller pieces here that this could screw onto, but just for now I'm going to print myself some little blocks, some spacers, just to give us some clearance to clear the parts on this board here. I'll also show you the cooling kit I've got for the Pi. So this is the cooling kit I've got. This is the main heatsink, and then there's a metal plate that goes on the bottom. I think the idea is it kind of almost forms a case for the Pi, so that sits on there and then that goes on top. It goes that way around. And it kind of gives the Pi a bit of protection. You've got the metal bottom protecting the bottom of it, and then the heatsink is the top. I know this looks like a heatsink, but it really isn't taking away any heat. The main heatsink is the top, and then there's a couple of little fans which are quite neat, small little fans that sit in here. Not quite sure which way around they go, but they essentially sit in there. I'll have to figure that out. And it gives you quite a neat little cooling solution that's nice and compact. Obviously comes with some heat transfer pads, so we can stick these onto the chips, and then it also comes with some screws so we can screw it all together, and you get a little Allen key as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use most of it, but I'm not going to use this metal plate on the bottom. I'm going to substitute that with my 3D printed part. So the first thing I'll need to do is screw this all together. So looking on the back of the heatsink, it looks to me like there's only 3 places that are actually going to transfer heat. You do seem to get a lot of these transfer pads. I guess they're just spares. So I believe that if we flip that over, I believe that translates to these 3 chips here. So I'll go ahead and stick the heat transfer pads on. So then I can go ahead and put the screws through and sandwich the board between the heatsink and my bracket. So I have already installed an operating system on here, and I've also installed MyRobotLab onto it, so we should be fairly ready to go once we get this together. So I thought I'd go with the heatsink, some sort of cooling solution, because I have heard that the Raspberry Pi 4s can overheat if you work them too hard. So that's that screwed on. Guess we could try and put the fans in next. They seem to fit better if you leave the cables at the top rather than trapping the cables underneath. Yeah, I think that's how they're supposed to go. Not too sure really. Fans look like they're going to draw air in. Not quite sure where that air is then going to go. Usually there's ridges in the bottom, so it actually come out both sides, I guess. thought it would be blowing the air upwards away from the heatsink. I guess it doesn't matter a lot.
Okay guys, so I'm going to screw in these screws over there. So we turn them in like this way. That's the first one. So guys, that's the bit. Don't know what that is, but let's just continue. We're going to be very pleased with that, guys. So I might do the final words. So I think my dad might do it, but so let's screw these in. Then yeah, so it looks like we're done. So yay! Sorry guys, we screwed them on the wrong way, but we did it on the wrong way now. Just gonna zoom in. Yeah, but never mind.
So what George is trying to tell you there is that some of the screws had a low profile head on them and some of them had a standard profile head on, and we got them a little bit muddled up, so we've just sorted that out now. The low profile ones go in the fans and the standard profile heads go underneath. So I've had a bit of a change of plan. I've designed a new surround with some differences, some changes. I'm actually going to mount the Raspberry Pi across the bottom like this. My original intention was to mount it sort of across here or even on this side. But after playing around with the cable, it just wasn't going to work. And it did also look a bit tight in the back of the robot. So I'm going to try and go this way. Again, it might not work. We may have to change our mind again. We'll just see how it goes. I've designed a new bracket to mount the Pi onto. So that'll go on here. 4 screws on there. And then this will fit on the back of the screen like this. Now, originally I had designed it so that this came all the way across here and screwed in at this point. But as you can see there, that was a bit of a mistake because this is where our touch connector comes out, so I've had to chop this little section out of here that was originally in there. I've cut that out because that's going to be in the way of that port there. I am actually still blocking off the power connector, but I don't think we need to use that. I certainly hope we don't need to. So the differences on this new surround, it's got the raised section here, you see, and a raised section here for this end there, and then another raised section in the back here to attach it in the middle. I've also added a couple of fixings here. What I'm intending to do with that is introduce this little power supply here. It's a little buck converter. Just pop that in there, and there's also a couple of fixings here where I'm actually going to put a cable clamp, which I've also designed here, will go in there. And that'll be where the power cable comes in. I've purchased a few of these. I bought quite a few. I think, are these called Jst Connectors? I'm not sure the correct name of these red connectors. They typically found in smaller LiPo batteries. So I thought I'd use them. We'll put a lead on the buck converter and we'll clamp it down in this little cable clamp here. Stop it from getting tugged out. And that'll give us a nice plug so we can disconnect it if we ever want to remove the screen. So I'll start putting this together. I gave up with that little Allen key that came with the kit. It was a bit too fiddly. This little bracket's a bit under engineered really, it should have been a little thicker. Flexes too much. I cut this section out so that we would clear these capacitors here. I think in hindsight it would have been better to take that bracket up and had another fixing at the top. So I think that's okay. I could try and get a fixing in here. There's no hole in there because the original hole was in the piece I chopped off. So I'm going to try and run a little drill through that. Just doing it by hand. Can't be bothered to get my drill out. There we go. Probably overdone that. Seems okay. Just going to go up another 0.5 millimetre. So we can't over tighten that one because it's not gripping in too much. But I think that's worked out. Managed to get another fixing in there. So what I'm going to do with the HDMI cable, we're using this original adapter that came with the screen, and then I've bought this HDMI extension cable. It's kind of an adapter to convert the full size to the micro HDMI. So what I'm hoping is that that's going to work like this. That'll plug in there. That goes in there. And then it's actually a little longer than I wanted. So we're going to go into one of these connections here. So I was thinking about, I don't know if it's critical which one we use. I don't know if the Raspberry Pi is going to be fussy about which connector we go in. So it kind of works out like that. Don't know if that's going to cause a problem sticking up like that. I don't think it will. I think that'll be fine. It's going to be a little awkward because that's where we kind of snap the screen in at the top, so it might have to be, yeah, we can probably sort of loop it over back on itself. I think that'll work. Okay, so the next thing to sort out is power, although we have also got the touchscreen cable. So that's just a USB lead really. It's going to go in there. That might be a problem. Yeah, that is going to be a problem, isn't it? We might need like a right angled connection, but then in that direction I've got the HDMI in the way, and in this direction I've got my bracket in the way. That is definitely going to be a problem. That's USB, so that can go in any of these. I think I was using one of the non version 3 ports, but it's going to work out better, I think, if I use this one. But that is a real problem. I can't have a cable sticking out like that, and that is just not gonna, it's not gonna work. Well, we'll carry on anyway. We'll have to figure something out. So the next thing is power. I think what I need to do is to solder on some cables to the output of the power supply, and they need to feed up to the pins on here. I'm going to have to double check which pins are the 5 volt. So we will need to set up the voltage on that before we connect it to the Pi, otherwise we'll risk damaging it. these wires seem to want to twist. Trying to keep them straight, but they just don't want to go straight. They've got a mind of their own. So I think it works. Just a little annoyed that the wires are twisted up. Well, it's basically got it together. Two steps I need to do is set up the voltage and then check which pins we need to connect on here. So giving it another test fit with the Raspberry Pi actually on the back of it this time, and it did fit in. The USB cable at this end was super tight. It has actually just sort of forced the screen over so it's hard against this side, and there's a little gap down this side. It's just because the USB cable is pushing it in that direction. The USB cable is also sort of hitting on the other side of this servo. There's a few millimeters gap. Yeah, we should have access to the audio connection that we need. So I'm reasonably happy that it physically fits in. It was a little bit of a challenge to get that together. So we just need to set up that power supply. Right, so I've adjusted the power supply so that we get exactly 5 volts out of the output. You can see I've just tidied up the wires a little bit here, and I've checked these pin connections and plugged them on. Our plus 5 volts is going into the very end pin there, and then our ground is over here. I looked that up online to check the exact positions because we definitely don't want to get that wrong. So I've just done a little bit more wiring to give us a power supply for the screen. I've taken this green cable here from the last spare switch that we had down here. So that's our positive 12 volt supply. And then I've just taken a black wire back to the terminals on the front of the robot for the negative return. So we can go ahead now and plug this cable in. The other things that would be nice to try and get connected would be all the USB connections. We've got 3 actually. We've got one from each Arduino, one here and one over here. And then we've got a third one down here on our little Arduino Nano. Got another USB cable coming off of that. So we should be able to plug all of those into the screen. So I'll go ahead and get that connected in. So I think it takes a little while for it to pick up the HDMI connection, so we kind of miss the beginning of the boot up sequence. But as you can see, it does boot up fine. I think I've just noticed that one of our lights are not working on our switch there. It seems to be giving us power because we've got both the screen lit up and we've got the Arduino Nano down here. It's powered on, and I believe the 2 switches here is one for the screen or the Raspberry Pi and one for the Arduino Nano and the NeoPixel. So I believe the switch is working, it's just for some reason the light isn't working. Could be that we've somehow dislodged the ground connection for the lamp, so I'll have to check that out. So I just really wanted to try and show you that we can control this Raspberry Pi remotely from our laptop still, and that we can fire up MyRobotLab. So I've got a VNC connection running here so that I can control the Raspberry Pi from my laptop, and you can see I've just fired up MyRobotLab. that's the new web interface for MyRobotLab. So we will have a play with that at some point. I think I did also see the old GUI fired up as well. Yeah. So there's the old GUI. I'm going to have a play around with this and figure out how the USB ports are going to be connected. They're probably going to have different port numbers. If I find an Arduino, I guess it's a little tricky. I can't right click the touchscreen. I think you hold it. I can do it from here on the VNC session. So eventually I'll have some kind of okay. It's a little slow, but it is doing it. I think we'll, yeah, I can see I've got a couple of new tabs at the top here now. I see, so I'm going to have to figure out what all these ports are here, because these have got different names from before we was running on Windows and now we're running on the Raspberry Pi, so we've got some different serial port numbers for our USB connections. So I have to figure out what is what and have a play around with that. But I'm really pleased we've got this screen running and we've got MyRobotLab installed on the Raspberry Pi, and we can control it via VNC from the laptop. So really pleased with that. If you have got any questions on any of this setup, then please leave me a comment. It really would be nice to hear from you what your thoughts are on how I've done all of this. It's been quite a lot of work to get that screen and Raspberry Pi all designed and built and installed, so it would be really nice to hear what you think of it. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. I'm really trying to build up my subscribers, so the best way of supporting the channel is to subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.